Buenos días. I am Señor Morris, and I'll be your Spanish teacher for this year. Now, every class, we're going to sing a song to greet each other. And the song goes like this. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo se sienten? Yo me siento bien. Hey, we're going to sing that quite a few times. Now, before I go on, I'd like to remind all of the teachers that in the Learning Partner Guidelines, there's a section called Program Preview. Please take a couple of minutes to read through this. It'll give you a good idea of how best to use these Spanish lessons. It'll make the lessons more useful to the students and hopefully a little bit easier for you. Now, students, if you were in class before, you already know me. If this is the first time you're in this class, you may not know me yet, so let me tell you some things about myself. I'm married, and I have 3 children. I studied Spanish by television when I was in elementary school, just like you're doing. After I graduated from college, I joined something called the Peace Corps, which sends Americans to all parts of the world to work with people in developing countries. I went to a country in South America called Paraguay, and I lived in a small village of about 500 people called Guayalbi. Now, the closest English-speaking person was about 50 miles away, so I used Spanish and the indigenous language of the people called Guarani. I made a lot of good friends there, and I even had a pet monkey. After I left Paraguay, I came back to the United States and went to school again and learned about teaching languages. I taught in a bilingual classroom for several years in El Paso, Texas, and then moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, where I live and teach now. Since I studied Spanish while I was growing up, I can understand what many of you who do not speak Spanish at home are going through. Hopefully, my experience will help make me a better teacher, and it'll make learning Spanish easier and more fun for you guys. Now, what I hope to do in this class is to teach you some things and some phrases and some things to say that you'll be able to use to talk to a Spanish-speaking person almost immediately. Now, we'll start off by going over some of the basic greetings so that you can use those with Spanish-speaking people almost immediately. Okay? We'll go over the basic greetings, how to ask personal information about different people. Now, the best way for you to really learn these things is to practice them. Practice with your classmates. Practice with your teacher, with people who speak Spanish in your community. Or teach some Spanish to your family and practice with them. Another thing that we'll be doing in class is learning about the way other people do things. Do you think that schools and foods are the same all over the world? No, of course they're not. People do things differently in a lot of places, and we're going to look at some of the things that they do differently, and we'll see what some of the things that they do the same as us. Okay? This is called culture, the way people do things. We'll examine some of the cultures of different people, and I think that you'll all find it pretty neat. Now, if you don't feel like you understand everything that I'm saying in Spanish, don't worry, that's normal. If you already understood everything, you wouldn't need to study Spanish, and then I'd have to go and look for another job. We'll go over everything that I teach several times, and I'll show you a lot of pictures and things to help you understand. Now, since you already speak a language, you can use your knowledge about languages in learning Spanish. Your present knowledge includes things like using context to figure out what a word means. For example, does anybody know what a velocipede is? Okay. Velocipede? Well, if you see this sentence, my velocipede had a flat tire, so I couldn't ride it to school. If you see that sentence, can you guess what a velocipede is? How could you know what it is? Well, a velocipede is a bicycle. And that's what we call using context. You probably do this all the time in English, and you don't even realize it. Another thing that you probably do is anticipate what the words are going to be. I tell you what, let's look at this and see how your anticipating skills are. One blank. I was going to the blank to buy a blank. Suddenly, a blank came out of nowhere and blanked me. I said, blank. And the blank, blank. Yeah, now that story is missing quite a few words. But I'll bet that all of you could think up some words to fill in the blanks. I imagine that you all used nouns in the blanks that needed noun, adjectives in the blanks that needed an adjective, and it wouldn't surprise me if you even used verbs with ed in the blanks that were appropriate for that. You see, your knowledge of English is very useful in learning Spanish. Another way that English helps is when you encounter a cognate. Okay? A cognate is a word that sounds almost the same in one language as in the other language, and it means the same thing. For example, the word clase. Clase is a cognate. Can anybody look at that and can you guess what clase might mean in English? Well, if you said class, you're right. Okay, clase, class. Now you can use all of those skills and more in learning Spanish. I'd like to recommend that everyone get a notebook to write down all of the things that we're learning about and studying in class. You'll also be using your notebook to do some of the activities that we'll be doing in class. Tell you what, let's go ahead and start off by looking at this example. Okay? When two people meet, they might say something like this. The first person might say, Hola, ¿cómo te llamas? Okay? And the second person would say, Me llamo Scott Morris. Okay? The first person might ask, ¿Cómo estás? And the second person can answer in a couple of different ways. And let's look at some of these ways right now. Look at this person. Oh, smiling. The eyes look all happy. If this person was asked, ¿Cómo estás? He might say, Estoy bien. Estoy bien. Yeah, all happy, feeling good. But this guy, well, he's not really smiling, but he's not crying or anything. If you ask this person, ¿Cómo estás? He might say, Estoy más o menos. Yeah, kind of more or less. Not really terrific, but not terrible. Oh, but look at this poor thing. Oh, the mouth's turned down. Her eyes don't look happy. Her brow is probably wrinkled. If you ask her, ¿Cómo estás? She would probably say, Estoy mal. Estoy mal. Okay. Now, sometimes when we're in class, I'll tell you to do this. I will say, repitan. Repitan. Okay, now this is a cognate. Can anybody guess what repitan means? It means repeat. Or say what I say after I say it. Okay? Well, I tell you what. Let's look at that dialogue that we just practiced again. That we just practiced and try it again. And this time, repitan. Okay, you ready? The first person might say, Hola, ¿cómo te llamas? Repitan. Okay. And the second person would answer, Me llamo Scott Morris. Only not everybody's going to say Scott Morris. You say what your name is, okay? Me llamo. Repitan. Okay. First person might ask this question. ¿Cómo estás? Repitan. Okay. And the second person can answer in a couple of different ways. The second person might say, Oh, estoy bien. Repitan todos. Or the second person might say, Estoy más o menos. Repitan. Or the person might say, Estoy mal. Repitan todos. Muy bien. Now, remember that I want you to practice that as much as you can with anyone that you can. Now, to go over one of the language skills that we discussed today, I'd like you to look at the activity sheet called Parejas de Cognados. Parejas de Cognados. And that sheet looks like this. Okay. Let's see. Go ahead up here where it says nombre. Write your nombre. And you can probably figure that out from using context. What do you usually see up at the top of a page? That's right. Voy a escribir mi nombre. Okay. Now the instructions for this activity say, match the Spanish cognate to the English word. You know a lot more Spanish than you think you do. Well, let's see over here. Here's an example. This word here in Spanish, idéntico. And let me see if I can get that in closer for you. There it is. Idéntico. We've already done this one. This one's letter Z. Z is identical. So, idéntico, identical. Well, let's look at this first one here that we're going to do together. Number 1. The word in Spanish is evidente. Evidente. Let's look over here at some of the words. Evidente, do you think that means exotic? Starts with the same letter, but it's different. How about correspondence? No. Admiration? I don't think so. Evidente, admiration. How about evident? Evidente, evident. Yeah, I think that's letter D. So go back over here, and next to evidente, we'll write the letter D. Now, one of the things that I always like to do to make sure that I don't get confused is once I use a word, I'll mark through it. That way I don't accidentally use it twice. This next word, inocente. Inocente. You can probably already guess what that one is, can't you? Inocente. Well, I'm going to give you a hint. That word is over here along the side. It's over here. Now I'm going to let you see if you can find that by yourself and write the letter next to the word inocente. I think you're going to be able to find that. Well, that's about all that we have time for today. Go ahead and finish this activity sheet up when your teacher gives you some time, whether it's right after this class now, sometime later in the day, maybe when you finish some of your other work, or if you take it home to work on it. Okay, depending on how your teacher wants you to do it, you might want to do it by yourself or with some other students from your class. Teachers, I'd like to remind you that the answer key for all of these activity sheets is at the back of the Learning Partner Guidelines, so you can check there for those. Okay? I look forward to our next class. And teachers, when you're in there in that Learning Partners Guidelines, please take a minute to go ahead and look at that program preview again. I think you'll really appreciate some of the information that it has to share with you about this program and the things in the Learning Partner Guidelines. So go ahead and do that if you get a chance. Okay. Right now, I'd like to share with you a favorite song of mine that we'll be singing throughout the year. And the words for this song and for all of the songs that we sing and all of the poems can be found in the student resource notebooks and in the Learning Partner Guidelines. Also, they'll appear on the monitor here. So if you can sing along, please do so. If you just want to listen this time, I understand. The song is called Cielito Lindo, and it goes like this. De la Sierra Morena, cielito lindo, vienen bajando un par de ojitos negros, cielito lindo de contrabando. Ay, 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 canta y no llores, porque cantando se alegran, cielito lindo, los corazones. And then as we finish every lesson, I'm going to tell you adios, and I'd like you to tell me back adios, and I'll see you next time, so adios.